Hello, thanks for taking a look at this video. My name is Ken. I direct the Master of Urban Spatial Analytics program at the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm also a professor of practice in the city planning program, also at Penn. I've been asked to tell you a bit about the work that I do. Aside from being an educator, I also run a consultancy called Urban Spatial that builds data-driven decision-making tools for really all sectors, but in particular, the public and nonprofit sectors. Here at Penn, as you might know, I am forever classified as the data nerd. And while this is true, I hope over the next few minutes to convince you that above all, I am a planner, just like you. So let me jump into it. I want to start by telling a story that I think motivates a lot of the work I do at the intersection of data science and public policy. So in 2017, Mayor de Blasio created a first of its kind automated decision systems task force in New York City that would go on to gather together a really remarkable interdisciplinary team of experts to understand how algorithms were being used in New York City. The task force worked for several years, attempting to convince city agencies to be more transparent about how they were using algorithms to guide decision making and resource allocation. Ultimately, they were stonewalled, and in the fall of 2019, the task force issued their final report, largely devoid of the detailed information they hoped to gather. That winter, the AI Now Institute issued a quote unquote shadow report, laying out a framework for creating, administering, and documenting algorithms in New York City going forward. It's really a transformational document, and for those of us interested in the role of technology in government, I urge you to check it out. For me, however, this saga led me to one really important question. Why was this effort to develop more effective governance around government algorithms such a resounding failure? I really have four thoughts about why this is, not just in New York, but in every city and every state nationwide. First, algorithms guide decision making, where and to whom we should allocate some limited resource. And divulging details on programs and tools that may be misallocating limited resources, this is a political liability. Algorithms, as you might know, are trained or they learn from previous experiences in data. And if resource allocation in the past was biased against poor communities or communities of color, then algorithms will be biased as well. And this leads to yet another political liability. The third reason I think this is true is that it is easier for a government agency to procure a black box third-party algorithm from some private company while largely remaining ignorant about the first two political liabilities I mentioned. And finally, all the stakeholders that involved in this process lack the appropriate conceptual and technological framework to understand the role of algorithms in government. And I want to focus on this last one for a moment because I think it's where planners can have great impact. And to do this, I'd like to take criminal justice as an example. As we all know, police, law enforcement, and the courts have massive planning and resource allocation questions. And these groups were very early adopters of algorithms in government because their resource allocation decisions come with very high social costs. So the tech that police departments in particular procure does the following. It collects a whole slew of data, both from their own administrative sources, other administrative data sources, and other third-party sources. They integrate all of that data to create a bunch of value-added intelligence process that they hope to use to create more useful, quote unquote, resource allocation decisions. So consider the term useful here. It's an important one that I use often, and I define it as tools that lead to improved outcomes relative to the business as usual crime fighting process, that which was not informed by the data. There is one significant consequence of all of this that gets the majority of attention nowadays. That is that many of these police algorithms are biased against communities of color. And this is because Black and brown communities are disproportionately identified or represented in criminal justice related data sets. So how do you think that police and other relevant stakeholders respond to the discriminatory nature of these algorithms? Well, let me tell you. Consider these right here are those stakeholders, the police themselves, communities, and politicians. And they all wish to have a say in the use of these tools. Each group has different goals, expectations, and technical understanding. Police want greater tools for crime fighting, full stop. Communities don't want increased surveillance, particularly if it reinforces historical racism and inequality. And politicians, well, frankly, politicians by and large have very little idea about what this tech does or how it could help or how it could hurt. They don't know if they should support the police or communities or what. And in the end, a lack of stakeholder agreement on this technology leads to a great amount of discord. And that discord can play out along a spectrum. If these groups could agree, it could actually lead to, as I said, useful crime fighting tools. And again, a useful tool is one that leads to a better decision relative to the business as usual decision making. But to do so, it must satisfy the bottom line of all of these stakeholders: crime fighting bottom lines, social equity bottom lines, economic, bureaucratic, political bottom lines, and so many more. Disagreement, however, stifles innovation. And frankly, that is what we have today. Of course, discord doesn't mean these tools won't be used. Why have transparency when private technology companies will sell agencies these black box algorithms? The bottom line is that we lack a set of community standards to dictate the appropriate use of this technology in government. Law enforcement is always the discussion, but it is important for you as planners to think about how data and algorithms can apply to use cases outside of crime, like homelessness, drug treatment, child welfare, affordable housing, anti-poverty initiatives, and more. If the new process disrupts the business as usual decision making, then this upheaval and discord is sure to result. So, what if I told you that these algorithms are discriminatory? Newsflash, right? Or not so much. In the criminal justice realm, these algorithms are mostly discriminatory. But what if I also told you that these algorithms can be useful in helping governments make better decisions and ultimately lead to healthier and more productive communities? How would you square those two things? Do you think there might be a role for planners to play at the intersection of technology and governance? Let me just mention that if our ilk, planners, don't get in the game, it'll be the engineers and computer scientists who will remain the arbiters of this trade off. Is that really what we want? And you thought you were coming here today for a talk on data science. Well, my goal, honestly, is to limit the damage done to society by people like this chump right here, who argued famously for a quote unquote move fast and break things approach to technology innovation. This attitude persists today and is responsible for the largest breakdown of democracy in my lifetime. So, a new approach is needed. And for me, that new approach is to start thinking about algorithmic decision making in government in the same way we think about program design in government. So, as you may know, governments state policy goals and then design programs as the tool to achieve those policy goals. Part of the program design is service delivery, to deliver resources when, where, and to whom they are most needed. To me, that's planning, but that is also what algorithms can do really well. As a data scientist and a planner, I try to make sure if we are going to build algorithms for government, they are both useful and equitable. Prediction, a big part of what I do, is a powerful planning tool. The way it works, using a couple examples real quick, is that we borrow from, say, the overdose experience on these vacant lots to predict the overdose risk on those vacant lots. Or maybe borrow the homelessness experience from these residents to predict homelessness risk for others. With a measure of overdose or homelessness risk for all lots or all families, governments can better prioritize their interventions and limited resources. My favorite example of forecasting and planning comes from the very classic 1925 Plan for Cincinnati. Here, as you can see on the graph, the plan's authors offer a very dubious population forecast, which made the assumption that historical growth would continue or generalize long into the future. In reality, a Great Depression, suburbanization, and deindustrialization caused the city's population to fall nearly 70% below its 1950 peak. Why did this forecast fail? Well, there are way too many interrelated systems here to be making confident forecasts in population. Making a population forecast for decades to come requires an understanding of housing markets, labor markets, immigration, technology change, etc. And not only those systems individually, but their interrelation. My interest is in much more bounded systems like a transit network, a housing tax credit, or eviction. By focusing on a very specific system, we can understand the business as usual resource allocation process, and then gather some data and model those data to see if a forecast can lead to a new decision making approach with more useful outcomes. But again, just because we can technically make forecasts, understand who is at risk, and perhaps allocate resources to lead to better outcomes, that doesn't mean there aren't significant social, economic, and political externalities. And this is why a new approach is needed, one that I call algorithmic governance. And incidentally, you might call such an approach planning. It works like this. First, evaluate a program and the business as usual decision making. Is it working or is it not working? What are the costs and benefits? What are the social costs? What are the economic costs? What are the social benefits? What are the economic benefits? Two, brainstorm on a more data-driven approach and then engage stakeholders on both the evaluation and on plans for perhaps an algorithm. Step 3, build an algorithm. Step 4, use a randomized control trial or another approach for evaluation to compare the algorithmic resource allocation to the business as usual approach. Do the social, economic, and etc. costs and benefits improve with the algorithm? And finally, re-engage the community to see what they think about our new approach. Community engagement is the foundation of algorithmic governance. It is also the foundation of city planning. It is how governments and their systems agree to new community standards. It gives them the opportunity to understand the value of trading off automation with better government. Without engagement, communities will be fearful of third-party software, data privacy, and increased surveillance. So yes, I am Ken Stife, the data scientist, but these are just my preferred set of methods. At heart, I'm really just a planner. But as an educator, I'm really excited by empowering social science students such as yourselves with these modern data science techniques. If you're interested in those, I urge you to check out the coursework we offer in the MUSA program, and in particular, this class we call the MUSA Practicum, where students build novel predictive algorithms for actual government clients. You can use this QR code or simply Google MUSA Practicum, but check them out. I also want to mention that if you're interested in learning how to write this code and to understand the many public policy nuances and context involved, you can take my class, and you can also hopefully check out this book, which comes out soon, called Public Policy Analytics. I'm quite excited about it, as you can imagine. So that is all for me. A couple other things to check out. If you're interested, go to the MUSA website. I'm sure many of you are in classes with MUSA students, so talk to them, find out what they are doing. Lots of planners take MUSA-related classes. You can also go check out the website of the consultancy I run. And I will stop for there, and thank you all.